Hello, welcome to the story of the founding of Fort Pierce Yacht Club. This presentation will introduce you to our founders and their vision of forming a first-rate sailing club. It will also focus on the achievements of our early members, whose energy and dedication built our clubhouse. Together, they established the principles of our club, the spirit of volunteerism, promoting safe boating, offering boating education for the community and youth, and participating in community activities. These principles form the foundation of our membership today and remain the purpose of Fort Pierce Yacht Club.
What the hell are you doing in my slip?
Not a particularly auspicious start, and perhaps not the motto we would like emblazoned on our burgee, but this outburst in 1973 from a tired and angry sailor probably marked the moment of conception of the Fort Pierce Yacht Club. Dottie and John Brennan were returning from Maine in their 36-foot Dickerson ketch Joy to the Vero Beach Municipal Marina, where they were holding a slip. Having called the dockmaster the day before to ensure their slip was ready and waiting, John was not amused after sailing all day and arriving in the evening to find another vessel occupying their slip. Fortunately for the Fort Pierce Yacht Club, the offending vessel was Signet, a 32-foot Kangaroo owned and occupied by Carol and Al Sargent. Out of this confrontational first greeting arose the lasting friendship of the Brennans and Sargents. Between 1973 and 1980, the Brennans and the Sargents were frustrated by the lack of boating activities in the community and considered various ways to meet this need. While encouraging area people like Mike Emmerich to race and focusing on racing activities, the Sargents and Brennans maintained a friendship while both were in Vero Beach, and Al continued to get boats out racing. The Sargents ultimately relocated to Fort Pierce, to the Fort Pierce Inlet Marina, to take advantage of the sailing offered offshore here. Once here, Al and John's conversations evolved into an ongoing discussion of the need for a club serving the Fort Pierce community dedicated to sailing. By 1980, driven by his passion for sailboat racing and the lack of local racing opportunities, Al Sargent was promoting the idea of creating in Fort Pierce the finest yacht club on the East Coast. Peter Smith, owner of Inlet Marina, joined Al and John in seeking others who would be interested in forming a yacht club focused on sailing. Al and John literally walked the docks in Fort Pierce seeking new members, and thus the Fort Pierce Yacht Club was born. By early May of 1980, an organization had taken shape with 8 members, and Peter Smith had incorporation documents drafted and sent to Tallahassee. On May 24, 1980, the first meeting of members of the Fort Pierce Yacht Club was held, with 8 of its then 10 members present. At that meeting, 5 members were elected to the board: John Brennan, Robert Penn, Al Sargent, Peter Smith, and Harold Woolley, Jr. The first meeting of the board was set to be held on June 7th. At that June 7th Board of Directors meeting, Al Sargent was selected as Commodore. Al immediately appointed 4 committees to launch the operations of the club. Bylaws Committee to create a draft of the bylaws of the club by next meeting. Activities to organize at least 1 cruise and 1 race before the next board meeting, and to prepare a schedule through year end. Facilities. Peter Smith had offered us the use of the dive locker on Seaway Drive outside of the Inlet Marina as a temporary meeting site. Al wanted to figure out how many member days of work were needed to prepare the facility, and then to start looking for a waterfront site we could call home within a mile of the inlet, as we would be out on the water all the time and our races would be held offshore. Membership. to prepare an application for new members and to prepare a statement of the club's activities for prospective members, as well as a publicity plan to recruit new members. Al set the goal of at least 50 members by the end of the year, 10 new memberships a month from now until December. During this meeting, a Club Burgee design was approved, which emulated Fort Pierce as the Sunrise City, and club membership cards, and our first press release was also approved. And then began an aggressive membership drive. Mike Emmerich crewed for Al Sargent, and one day during after-race martinis, Al asked Mike to sign some paperwork, and then asked for a check for $50 and congratulated him on his membership in the Fort Pierce Yacht Club. Joe and Debbie Crevan came to an annual meeting to get to know the club and were recruited on the spot by Al, and by Al asking for their vote in the upcoming election. Dick and I moved to Florida in August of 1980 to a canal full of powerboats. Within a few weeks, we were delighted to find on the front page of the local paper a large picture of a sailboat with a name and number to call for participation in a yacht club being formed in Fort Pierce. We called the name, Al Sargent, immediately and made an appointment to be interviewed at our home. I made sure the house was spiffy and determined not to say anything controversial, lest they turn us down. When Al Sargent and John Brennan walked in the house, the first thing Al said was, "Do you mind if I smoke?" I opened my mouth to say of course not, when Dick, my husband, beat me to the punch and said, "No, we don't smoke in our home." Oh my goodness! But they overlooked what I considered a faux pas and let us join the Fort Pierce Yacht Club. The second members' meeting of the Fort Pierce Yacht Club was held December 13, 1980. The club was only 6 months old. Minutes show a membership totaling 74 with an additional 10 applications. There was $2,400 in the bank. Membership had been surveyed, with over 90% of the members supporting the acquisition of a waterfront site as a permanent home. There were monthly races and cruises with at least 25 boats participating and over 60 sailing boats in the fleet. Many of the fundamentals of the Fort Pierce Yacht Club were established in its first 2 years of existence. In 1981, Robert Penn was selected Commodore to succeed Al Sargent, and during his term the following was accomplished. Social Chair Bailey organized our first Commodore's Ball to be held at Dodger Pines in Vero Beach. Formal dress, band, dinner, cash bar at $15 per person. We held the first director's reception, having 140 members and wives in attendance. Carol Sargent had come up with an idea of a monthly member newsletter to be called Channel 6 and got the board's approval for a July 1981 first edition. Nancy Spaulding got 15 boats signed up for the spring cruise to the Abacos, and along with Jane Strazula ran a first mate program to teach people how to provision for such a trip. Penn launched the advisory committee as required by our bylaws, to be chaired by Al Sargent, our first and only past Commodore. And the facility committee was searching hard for a club site. They had a list of 10 waterfront possibilities. The club was very focused on sailing activities during these first few years under the care of Joe Crevan. During our second year, we held 10 races and a club regatta with approximately 30 boats on the start line, and the first invitational regatta, for which a regatta cap with a special regatta logo was designed. Southeast Florida PHRF organization had admitted us to the conference for establishing PHRF ratings for our members, and we were attracting new members by showing sailing movies and inviting the public. Joe Crevan reported, however, that there was a need to enforce the racing rules. Al Sargent was apparently pushing the envelope by crowding boats at the mark, and his response to their shout-out was, "Trying to comply." Our little club managed to organize 3 separate cruises to the Bahamas each year over the first couple of years. We not only cruised, but we participated in the Bahamian races. The Bahamian races were a big deal. Racers from around the world came to participate. We met one captain from New Zealand. and met our New Jersey dentist who was crewing for a Miami boat. For some reason, Dick and I found ourselves crewing for Al Sargent in one race, and he was trying to get from point A to point B, an impossibility, but he kept going with the other racers yelling and shouting at him. He simply sat back, holding the helm and saying loudly and clearly, "Trying to comply, trying to comply." Now, you would think Dick and I would have been embarrassed by this, but our deep respect and admiration for this special man was overpowering. We could never be embarrassed by him. You may be of the opinion that entirely too much time and effort has been spent on this dissertation about the events of the club in its first informative year. The purpose of any history is to record as accurately as possible those historical facts and events that got us to where we are today. During this first year, the idea of a first-rate club starting in the mind of one man, Al Sargent, grew to include a total of 84 members by the end of 1980. This was a remarkable achievement when comparing the number of sail and other boats in the Fort Pierce and Vero Beach area then as compared to now. This was obviously not a one-man effort, but happened because others also became enthused over the prospect of having their own club and matched Al in enthusiasm and hard work to make it happen. Reportedly, Al Sargent, John Brennan, and Harold Woolley literally walked the docks in the area looking for prospective members, primarily sailors. They were obviously eminently successful, far surpassing their initial goal of 50 members by the end of 1980. During this first year, a successful and energetic sailboat racing program was established. We added a rule to the U.S. sailing rules called Trying to Comply. Several cruising events took place. The first director's reception was held, as was the first Christmas party and trophy award ceremony, and the first Commodore's Ball. Bylaws were written and approved by the members, and an energetic search for a club site was ongoing. All in all, this was a remarkable achievement in view of the small nucleus of individuals doing the work. In 1983, Fort Pierce Yacht Club took another step forward. It admitted women as voting members. Women were working very hard to get our club started, with organizing dinners, meeting cruises and all, writing Channel 6, teaching provisional courses. We did not think it fair that we did not get to vote along with our husbands, so we were not willing to work anymore unless we had full voting rights. Now I know it's unique to have husband and wife as voting members, but that's the way it had to be. Commodore Ward was supportive and forwarded an amendment to the male membership for approval. The vote to award women full voting rights along with their husbands was approved by the memberships, and Nancy Spaulding was the first woman to be elected to the board of directors. This paved the way for our first ever Women at the Helm race in 1983, the Fort Pierce Yacht Club Women's Cup, and the first female Commodore, Betty Jo Porter, in 1992, and in 1994 the grant of a second Woman at the Helm trophy. We have run 40 Women at the Helm races. Early on, the founders set the goal to have their own clubhouse, and what a bumpy road that was. But we were blessed when the county supported the idea of our taking over a lease on this property, which could not be implemented by its leaseholder, and the city of Fort Pierce supported it. And now began the real work. What a challenge Commodores Joe Crevan and Joe Krishnak faced. Crevan divided the board and committee members into two groups in planning for the new clubhouse. Some were to work on how we would raise the money to build the clubhouse, and some were to design the building. Krishnak had architectural plans drawn up with a preliminary cost estimate from a builder for $98,000. Towards that, we had $74,000 raised from our members, leaving us about $24,000 short. Preben had already worked on getting a bank loan for the rest, and some of our members were willing to co-sign the note for us. Krishnak worked hard to bring everything together to have the building ready to go by the end of his term so that we could hold our December 1986 annual meeting in our new clubhouse. The sum total of time, energy, dedication, and perseverance created what is our clubhouse today. 30 members bought $500 bonds earning 8%, which were retired by 1996. Other members paid $2,500 and were rewarded with a lifetime membership. We broke ground with a big celebration, including many club boats anchored out front. A year later, we were finished. We held a dedication ceremony with County Commissioner Fenn cutting the red ribbon. What a celebration it was to have our own clubhouse. At the 1986 annual meeting held in our clubhouse, Commodore Krishnak said, quote, "Future club members will be eternally grateful to those who donated thousands of hours and thousands of dollars to make the clubhouse a reality." And so began Chapter 2 of the Fort Pierce Yacht Club, a sailing club with a home on terra firma. There are hundreds of examples of what a special place this is because of the dedication of extraordinary club members. And today we have selected but a few as examples of leadership at critical points in our history. There is one very important award that was granted on May 7, 1980 by Eric Lamplow, just as the club was incorporated. This trophy was meant to recognize members' outstanding contributions to the club. Outstanding service was the key to Fort Pierce Yacht Club's success, and the early members chose to recognize one member a year whose contribution was outstanding, as we still do today. The 35 people on the list of recipients stand as validation of the extraordinary work done by extraordinary individuals to create and carry on an entity called the Fort Pierce Yacht Club. These 35 do not stand alone. To all Fort Pierce Yacht Club members who have given their time and undertaken the tasks necessary to make our club run, thanks to all of you who have given so much so that we can all continue to have so much.
This presentation concludes with the completion of our clubhouse over 30 years ago. We have all greatly benefited from the vision and energy of those early members and have evolved our club to what it is today. How will we move forward from here? The future of Fort Pierce Yacht Club is in your hands.